making innovation count for the last mile. And for us, the last mile is not just geography. My bosses would expound on this, shortly. And we are so privileged to have members of the press, to help us take this conversation outside this room, and also helping us share the success stories, the progress, and commitments made, to a wide audience. So again, a warm welcome and thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Adekemi. Talking about the Gender and Inclusion Summit, we have come a long way, and we quickly like to show you, the journey, how we started. This was conceptualized in 2022, so this will be our 5th year holding the Gender and Inclusion Summit, and we just want you to have a glimpse of how we have grown and, the level of impact this summit has provided, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa as well. So, media, are you ready? To give us okay, Mrs. Miriam Uwais, OON, board member, Policy Innovation Center, for her special remarks. Can we give her a round of applause, please? Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, members of the press, distinguished guests, partners, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really delighted to join you in setting the stage for the Gender and Inclusion Summit 2026. It's our 5th one, and we're still growing. We're hoping to convene stakeholders that address gender development, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa. Now, what does this mean for us? It means ensuring that we move from policy commitments to measurable delivery. So we know we don't lack gender policies. Our major challenge is translating commitments into implementation. So the question is, what changes for the woman and the girl at the last mile? We need to put evidence at the center of gender policy. So we need to use sex desegregated, location-specific and socio-economic data to identify who has been left behind and how we can address those challenges. Policy should not be based only on averages and on the lived realities of women in different regions and circumstances. Sorry, policy should be based on the lived realities of women in different Just how many women we have trained, we have to look at the impact it has made in their lives. And so it's about their lived realities. And we must institutionalize inclusion. So gender responsive approaches should be embedded in government systems, planning processes, budgets and accountability mechanisms so that progress does not depend on individual champions. And then we need to make an effort to scale whatever works. This summit's emphasis is on making innovations count for the last mile. And it provides an opportunity for us to ask which gender innovations have actually demonstrated results and what prevents them from being taken to scale. The next frontier for gender inclusion is not generating more commitments, it is building the systems. It is financing, it is evidence and accountability mechanisms that turn those commitments into results for women and girls, especially those furthest from opportunities that are available at federal and even sometimes at state level. So I'd like to urge you all to attend and to give us as much publicity so that we're able to really make an impact and bring innovation to the last mile, because there's so many women and girls that don't have opportunities. And I mean, when you hear about these things, sometimes you think it's incredible, but we take so much for granted when we're at this level. Let's make an effort and see and collaborate to ensure that whatever effort we make actually reaches the last mile. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Can we do much better with our round of applause? Yeah, thank you so much, Ma. That was awesome. So policy should be based on lived experiences. And inclusion is not just about participation, it's about outcomes. Thank you so much, Ma. Media, are you ready for me now? All right, so the next few minutes, we'll just have a glimpse of the journey of the Gender and Inclusion Summit.
When PSC was set up in 2021, the first thing we thought it was important to fix around the conversation on gender was capacity. And so we set up the Gender and Development course. We had the first edition in April 2022. But leading from the Gender and Development course, in June 2022, we were thinking of having some conversations around gender. Gender is not about creating a buzz or a call to action, holding placards, and then everybody goes home. Gender for me is that point where we start the conversation about understanding how society constructs roles for men and women. To show the seriousness of the conversation around gender, it was first of all important to have a dedicated platform
where everyone could be heard, where everyone could speak, and using different ways to ensure that the knowledge is passed across. And the only solution to that was a summit. The Gender and Inclusion Summit kicked off in 2022. We had 700 people in the room in Transcorp. We had over 3,000 people joined virtually. And we had some people outside of Nigeria. Combined over the 2 days, we had over 1,000 people attend.
Immediately we said, you know what, we're not letting this die here. So first of all, we're going to ensure that we create a publication that guarantees that post-summit people can make reference to the conversation, use that as an advocacy tool into the coming year. And that's how we developed the Purple Book. The beautiful thing about the Gender Summit is that we are so very organic in the way we are evolving the summit. 2023 Gender Summit, we introduced a day zero, which is now the Gender Summit Learning Workshop. We titled that workshop, Measuring What Matters.
For many reasons. I think one is that I think we've just had the sheer audacity to do this 5 times. So I think for that, the courage to just keep powering through despite all the challenges, in sustaining a platform. I think that is something that we are excited about. But also the fact that we clearly understand that in building an inclusive society, it's important to
just have that sort of tenacity to continue to advocate, sometimes for the same thing over and over again, because sometimes it takes that level of grit and focus to just ensure that we're able to see the sort of measurable outcomes and progress that is necessary to build an inclusive society. We've been very intentional about the themes of the Gender Summit over the past 5 years. When we started this conversation in 2022, we started just trying to understand the landscape for connecting the dots to a gender inclusive society. And then we moved on to begin to understand how to build bridges across all the different sectors and fragmented systems within our economy. And then we took this a step further to try to begin to understand, okay, which voices need to be amplified, which voices do we need to bring into the room. And one of the things that struck us last year for the first time in the Gender Summit, being able to actually not just amplify the voices of the vulnerable, but bring the vulnerable in the room to speak for themselves, was really that shared understanding of the sort of systemic and structural barriers that limit access to the innovation that we sometimes develop very far away from the last mile. So many times, we had a meeting yesterday just in-house here, looking at some products that some of our team members are developing in PIC. And at some point, I had to say to my colleagues that some of your innovations are beautiful, but at best elitist. Because many times when we develop without really understanding the felt needs of those who are at the last mile, we develop products that are good. We develop services that are beautiful, but they are not really of relevance to meeting the needs of people whose vulnerabilities we don't clearly understand. And that's why, as we began to think about the 2026 Gender and Inclusion Summit, we thought that building on last year, where we now were able to amplify those people's voices, we started to ask ourselves, how do we move from agenda to action? There's a lot of agenda setting that goes on, even within the policy and program space. But how do we begin to ensure that the innovations we are building are actually counting for the very last mile? And when I'm talking of the last mile, for example, within Abuja, I'm not talking about maybe Life Camp or Kuje, for example, if we're using location as the defining point. I'm talking about the very last mile in terms of, using an intersectional lens to look at all the defining factors for what access means. And so one of the first things that we begin to do today is ask ourselves, what does the last mile really mean? So for more context, the word last mile is used across a wide range of sectors, It's used very commonly in the logistics sector. We use that in telecoms. And we're really looking at the very final step in a process where a service or product reaches an end user. That stretch is usually the most expensive to reach, the hardest to build, and so usually is the last to build, or it never actually gets built. That's why when you pick up your mobile phone signal, the farther you go from the center, the less you're able to pick the signals required to power your phone and get the connectivity that you need. Because it takes a lot more in terms of infrastructure to build for that last mile. And many times everybody is asking themselves, what is the cost benefit of building for the last mile, given the fact that I may not get the sort of ROI, return on investment, I need to build at that level. So this word, when we now bring the last mile conversation into development, it is looking at the distance between an innovative solution and the person who needs it most. So let's put this in context. If we look at the 2022 Multidimensional Poverty Index report, it tells us that 63% of Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. That's about 133 million Nigerians. But if you dig deeper into this report, it tells us that majority of that 63% live where? In hard-to-reach areas, in rural areas. So what that means is that if you use the Multidimensional Poverty Index to begin to think about not just income. We're not looking at income here. We're looking at multidimensionality. So we're looking at health, we're looking at education, we're looking at living standards. If we are now looking across the spectrum of deprivation, okay, we now see that the person at the last mile we're trying to reach with those innovative solutions are people in the hardest to reach areas. And the NPI has already defined that for us. So if we're looking at a market woman who is deciding in the afternoon whether today's money can feed the household tonight or stock goods to sell tomorrow, it may not be able to do both. So it's talking about a parent who is making a decision between access to basic amenities or access to education, is talking about access to issues relating to literacy, whether a child goes to school. When we look at simple conversations around, should a child help me at home or should I put a child in school, those are not conversations we negotiate in urban areas, right? But it becomes more critical when we now move into hard to reach areas, when the cost benefit of ensuring that I can put food on my table makes me negotiate the need for that child to help me on the farm. So when we start to think about the cost of reaching the last mile, we now realize that majority of our population may be left behind if we are not innovating within the Nigerian context. If 133 million people are multidimensionally poor, if majority of those people are in hard-to-reach areas, if all the agenda setting is only limited to people in urban and suburban areas, then we may not be really developing solutions that can reach those who need to be lifted out of poverty. So for the next few minutes, I just really want to break down what this summit aims to achieve. Over the past few years, as we have set a lot of conversations at the Gender Summit around building bridges for a gender-inclusive society, around access to education, around access to health services, a few conversations have come up. What is happening at the local government systems? What is happening at the level of the wards? What is happening in the communities? Are we developing solutions? For example, we are looking at, we're in the AI revolution, we are thinking about a lot of digital solutions. To what extent can digital innovation scale solutions when you don't have connectivity in rural areas, for example? To what extent can I provide opportunities to develop solutions with my smartphone when it's not even possible for someone in a rural area to afford a smartphone? So what sort of solutions should I be thinking about? Should I be thinking about solutions that that can use, for example, USSD? What sort of simple solutions? Should I even be thinking outside the digital space? How do we begin to think more deeply about solutions that can scale innovations at the last mile? So as we begin to think about the 2026 Gender and Inclusion Summit, it is anchored in the imperative to move from agenda to action by ensuring that innovations, policies, and commitments can translate to measurable improvements in the lives of those who are furthest behind. So for every forum, for every roundtable, for every session we have at the 2026 Gender Summit, we are going to be connecting those conversations to those at the last mile. This summit will focus on strengthening the pathways that carry solutions from concept to scale, prioritizing inclusive design, looking at evidence, looking at accountability, ensuring that innovators are held accountable for co-creating practical roadmaps that address structural barriers and expand access to services that are essential for women, young people, persons with disabilities in underserved communities. At its core, GS26 is a call to ensure that innovation delivers real value to where it matters most. And it matters the most at the last mile. GS26 is designed for depth and action. We want to blend high-level dialogues, conversations, with technical working sessions, with co-creation labs, and structured partnership engagements that ensure that innovations are reaching the last mile with deliverable measurable targets that lead to gender responsive actions. A lot of questions have come up. Who pays for innovation at the last mile? Given the fact that it's a lot more expensive and is less cost effective when you don't have the base infrastructure to drive innovation at that level. Well, the answer for me for that is, if you want to have 3/4 of your entire population left behind, then the other question to ask is, do we want to go and reverse all our development outcomes and reverse the opportunity to continue to advance the SDGs by also leaving an entire segment of the population behind? So while we have a lot of hard questions to answer, I think what is more critical for us at this time is, what is the opportunity cost of leaving 133 million people behind? And what would that mean for the future of the Nigeria we would like to see? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mark. We can do much better. Let's give her a warm round of applause. Thank you so much, Mark. So I'm sure by now we understand what the last mile means. It's not just a geographical location, but this is like the 3/4, of the population of Nigeria. So it's very, very important that whatever solutions we are creating or developing, it gets to that population. Another warm round of applause for Dr. Osasuye. All right. Okay.
When PSC was set up in 2021, the first thing we thought it was important to fix around the conversation on gender was capacity. And so we set up the Gender and Development course. We had the first edition in April 2022. But leading from the Gender and Development course, in June 2022, we were thinking of having some conversations around gender. Gender is not about creating a buzz or a call to action, holding placards, and then everybody goes home. Gender for me is that point where we start the conversation about understanding how society constructs roles for men and women. To show the seriousness of the conversation around gender, it was first of all important to have a dedicated platform
where everyone could be heard, where everyone could speak, and using different ways to ensure that the knowledge is passed across. And the only solution to that was a summit. The Gender and Inclusion Summit kicked off in 2022. We had 700 people in the room in Transcorp. We had over 3,000 people joined virtually. And we had some people outside of Nigeria. Combined over the 2 days, we had over 1,000 people attend.
Immediately we said, you know what, we're not letting this die here. So first of all, we're going to ensure that we create a publication that guarantees that post-summit people can make reference to the conversation, use that as an advocacy tool into the coming year. And that's how we developed the Purple Book. The beautiful thing about the Gender Summit is that we are so very organic in the way we are evolving the summit. 2023 Gender Summit, we introduced a day zero, which is now the Gender Summit Learning Workshop. We titled that workshop, Measuring What Matters. So this 2025, we've dreamt of the next 5 years. We're really, really ambitious. We see the Gender and Inclusion Summit as that place people want to be every September, not just to curate conversations, but to really enrich their personal experience, professional experience, their organizational experience, and bring together cutting-edge collaborations that would advance gender equity in Africa.
All right, thank you so much. So I'm sure to our audience there, you are gingered already to attend the Gender and Inclusion Summit 2026. Another round of applause for our media team. Okay, moving forward, I'll be calling on Dr. Tayo Aduloju, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Nigeria Economic Summit Group, NESG, for his remark on the significance of gender and inclusion for Africa's future. You're welcome, sir.
So good morning, distinguished members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, and our distinguished board member and guests, critical partners, from Minister for Women Affairs. I think that Dr. Sasui has laid out the last mile imperative very nicely and clearly. And the reason why it's important is usually the last mile is the nexus of exclusion. The last mile is the nexus of the disconnected. The last mile is usually the nexus of the forgotten. The last mile is usually the nexus of the unseen. You know, the data Dr. Sasui pointed to, 133 million multidimensionally poor Nigerians, 79% of them are rural, tells you there's a geographic story to the forgotten, to the unseen, to the unheard, to the last mile. When you look at that number, the significant percentage of that number are children. So, by the way, the unseen are also the youngest amongst us. And when you look at why that unseen number, the children are the most, is because their mothers are excluded. So when you pull those numbers together, you cannot avoid the data imperative of the mother, the young girl child, and the child as a fundamental last mile imperative to reach, to transform, to carry along, to not leave behind. Now, because the last mile imperative has been laid out by Dr. Sasui, it's important to scale the conversation just 1 ounce further, 1 inch higher, to note that in 2050, 25 years from now, the entire continent of Africa will have an under 35 population of about 900 million. 900 million. 320 million of that under 35 population will be Nigerian. That's, not half, but that's a sizable number enough to get your attention. Over 1/3 of that future number will be here. And if the last mile demographic I just painted is true, it means that young generation 25 years from now, that child who has been forgotten in her first 2,000 days of life, right? Who we are missing, even in the statistic, if you have 28 million unregistered childbirths, it means that you missed most of our children at birth, right? Then we try and find out why we are missing them in school, because of course, once you miss them at birth, you miss them at vaccination, you miss them at nutrition security intervention, you will miss them at school, and that's where your 18 million out of school children number comes from. So this last mile conversation is not going anywhere without us taking it somewhere. And you can't wish the problem away. It's here to stay. And it's either a problem we fix together, or it's a problem that will crystallize into future crises with cascading consequences that all of us, rich, poor, urban, rural, elite, non-elite, north, south, east, west, will deal with. So I think that the summit this year, GS26, anchors this question of innovation where it needs to sit. I mean, those of us from the private sector, innovation is simple. A product can be invented, wonderful products. Innovation is whether the product can scale to market saturation, right? That's how we businessmen in the private sector look at it. So for us, when we say innovation, making innovation count, we're asking, where are the ideas that truly put 10 million children in school in 2027? Where are the ideas that cut child mortality by half in 26 months or 36 months? Show us the plans that ensure that we can go from 12 million adolescent girls who are not just out of school, but are now guaranteed to be illiterate because they are in, invisible walls, patron-gated systems that exclude them from education and imposes on them cultural constraints that defines their economic empowerment. Show me how you get the 12 million girls moving, right? So it's not just solutions, it's solutions at scale, because our problem, ladies and gentlemen, is already at scale, right? We're not hoping to fix, I mean, it's okay to put 100 out of school children in school. It's, little drops of, water makes a mighty ocean. Problem is that our ocean has already become an ocean. And so solutions to capture oceans matter. Okay? And so 3 ideas. One is, those of you in Nigeria and around Africa that have built solutions that you're sure can scale, please show up at the summit. Those of you who have the kind of money, philanthropic leaders, corporate leaders, who already have the kind of money that are just waiting to back ideas that can scale, please show up at the summit. Those of you in government who are building solutions that can scale, please show up to hear innovators discuss the constraints to what can scale. In my short life, I have been to the poorest, multidimensionally poorest locations in Nigeria by statistical data, visited the communities, and watched how our English sometimes in the policy centers is a complete, is noise-making to the people in the field. How do you tell someone whose shock level is every 4 months? In other words, once you intervene now, in 3 or 4 months, an external shock will wipe everything out and they start again. How do you tell them to hope? How do you tell a community that is overtaken by flood every 7 months or 8 months to plan? They can't even plan to keep their children in school. How do you tell a community that has become a roving community, they relocate every year because of shocks at the interface of resilience, survival, and just getting by? You can't even discuss productivity, significance, and success with them, right? How do you tell them to move if innovations don't scale? And I think we need innovations. So there's innovations that scale for the last mile, and there's innovations that make last mile intervention even possible. We need both. And so this is calling on all innovators, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa. If you care about Africa, you have to care about this Nigerian problem. Because the problem here is a problem everywhere. You fix Nigeria, you fix Africa, right? 1 out of every 4 black men in the world is Nigerian. Like I said, 1/3 of every future young African will be Nigerian. It makes a difference. So therefore, my charge, my call to action is that this is not a NGO meeting. This is not a civil society meeting. This is a national leadership meeting of innovators, of private sector leaders, of business leaders, of serial entrepreneurs, of investors, of philanthropic funds, right, of government policymakers from federal and state and local government. Let's gather together and get this work done. Because if it counts at the last mile, then our future will be radically different, from our past. Thank you so much for listening. And see you at GS26.
Thank you, sir. We can do better. Let's clap. Let's not be holding the clap. Thank you so much, sir. Such an awesome remark. Okay, so moving forward, be calling on Dr. Amina Dorai, who is the Regional Portfolio Director, Pathfinder International for West and Central Africa. She is the chairperson for our, Technical Advisory Committee for the GS this year. Over to you, Ma. You're welcome, Ma.
Thank you very much, and good morning, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, the Policy Innovation Center, our hosts for today, and all Nigerians that are listening to us today, because I think for me, we're talking to Nigerians and not only the people in this room. I have been part of the Gender and Inclusion Summit for a while. In 2024, I was a speaker, and my organization, Pathfinder International, was a partner. And in 2025, I was a participant. So I have had the opportunity to experience the summit from different perspectives, as a speaker, a partner, an attendee. And what stood out for me is the quality of the conversations, and importantly, the effort to move beyond just talking about gender and inclusion to asking very hard questions and important questions. What can we actually do differently to create meaningful change? And this year, being part of the Technical Advisory Committee gives me an opportunity to even contribute more directly to shaping the conversations and ensuring that they are grounded in evidence, practical experiences, and the realities of the people we ultimately seek to serve. You listened to the population most in need. Over 100 million population in Nigeria are at rural areas, are hard to reach. This is more than 5 to 6 countries in Africa combined. That is the real challenge that we're facing. And for me, making innovation counts for the last mile, just like Dr. Derisu and other speakers mentioned. It's about ensuring that innovation is not just something that looks good on paper, because we're always talking about innovation, or an innovation that we discuss in a conference room or in a research discussion, but something that actually improves the lives of people that needs it the most. The real test of any innovation is how it reaches that woman in rural Abarma in Zamfara State, that young person who is often left behind in a place like Ipapo in Oyo State, the health worker working with limited resources in Udi in Enugu State, and many, many other communities that are furthest from both opportunities and resources. So for me, making innovation count means taking good ideas, because we have very good ideas. We have great innovators in the country. I've attended conferences outside Nigeria that Nigerians actually come first in innovative solutions. But how do we move those evidences, those technologies, and translate them into solutions that are both accessible, affordable, and inclusive, and also sustainable? So it's not just a pilot, it's what can be made to scale. And then making sure that, of course, they reach every single Nigerian and every single African. In my role as the Regional Portfolio Director for Pathfinder's West and Central Africa region, I've seen that the challenges are the same everywhere, with very minimal differences. And I think for me, the Gender and Inclusion Summit has a very important role to play, both in Nigeria and Africa. As the chair of the Technical Advisory Committee, I want to help bring a strong focus on the relevance of this summit, the evidence, and the action. And the theme for this year, From Agenda to Action, Making Innovations Count for the Last Mile, it actually captures most of the challenges that we in the development sector face. And even at governments, we have policies, we have commitments, but the real measure is the success of these commitments and their translation into the broader underserved communities, as I mentioned earlier. So for me, I would like GS26 to be a space where we bring together different perspectives, as usual: government, civil society, the private sector, development partners, academia. We're calling on academia, and young people, and even communities themselves, the leaders in the communities, to join us to have these conversations, to have honest and practical discussions about what moves innovation from innovation to impact. What has worked, what the evidence tells us, what the barriers are, what we need to do, each and every one of us, our roles, and the solutions that we can adopt to reach each and every one at the last mile. So we need to work together, and that's what this summit is all about. One of the things I'm particularly excited about all the gender inclusion summits is actually that the discussions don't end there. We have the Purple Book, which is an important part of the continuum. It captures insights, recommendations coming out of the summits, and this helps to translate the conversations into actionable policy and program solutions. So for me, I also look forward to this year's Purple Book and how we would all, convene, and how all these discussions that we're going to have will ultimately be brought together to lead to impact. So why is this summit particularly important? One of the things is the diversity of the people that are brought to the table, the quality of the speakers, the perspectives that it brings together, and the opportunity for all of us to learn, to challenge our thinking, to share our evidences, and to build partnerships. Build partnerships, and I say that again, because without partnerships, we cannot work together to translate pathways for action. So another reason why I'm really excited about the summit this year, and why I continue to align myself with the Policy Innovation Center on this important initiative, is because of the conversations that need all our voices to be in one table, on one table. There are very few platforms in Nigeria and across Africa actually that bring people together this way to have meaningful conversations around gender, inclusion, policy, and solutions needed to drive change. And this is the summit we should all be part of. Real change can only happen when we work together, we speak with one voice, and say no to exclusion. We cannot continue to watch as our policies, innovations, and solutions that could transform lives and ensure that our people are really, they meet the human capital development indices. So we must continue to move from conversations to actions, and there's a role for each and every one of us in making this change happen. So my invitation to everyone is very simple. Come to GS26, the Gender and Inclusion Summit 26, with your ideas, with your experiences, with your evidence, and your willingness to collaborate. Your willingness to collaborate. Whether you are a policy maker, you're a researcher, you are a development practitioner, you are a private sector leader, an innovator, a young person, a community elder or community member, or even someone that is just passionate about building a more equitable and inclusive society, there's a place for you in this conversation. So join us in September and let us move together the agenda to action and make innovation count where it matters most, and that is the last mile. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma. Thank you very much. So we are looking out for you. So the Gender and Inclusion Summit, just like everyone has emphasized, is for everyone. It's for policymakers, for a young person, a young innovator. Come with your ideas, come with your innovations. We are waiting to receive you, in September 8th and 9th. All right, thank you so much. I would also be inviting the representative from the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs in the person of Madam Hadiza Zubaiduru Kamawa Kams, who is the Special Advisor Policy to the Honorable Minister of Women Affairs. You're welcome, Ma. Please, let's give her a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Good morning, everybody. The Policy Innovation Center, the board members, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. I am here this morning on behalf of the Honorable Minister. She extends her apologies. She's presently attending the council meeting of Women Affairs in Taraba and sent her apologies, but she will definitely be part of the GS 26 in September, inshallah. For me, I would start by recognizing and acknowledging the fact that the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs has been a progressive partner on this gender summit. Specifically last year, There was an active participation by the ministry. We were part of the planning from the very first meeting throughout to the briefing, and of course till the end and when the Gender Summit held. A special session was held for the ministry specifically on the family thematic area. It's an area, it's a sector, I will say, a part of the ministry's mandate that was never fully activated. As you know, the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs has the full mandate for women, children, the vulnerable group, and the families. But for a very long time in Nigeria, the conversation has been around women and children. It's been very silent on the vulnerable, quite silent also on the family. So we saw this particular summit as a platform, an opportunity platform for the ministry to amplify its voice when it comes to provisions or protection, social protection for the family, the vulnerable, the children, and the women. So since morning, the conversation has been on the last mile. And I smiled to it when Dr. Tayo spoke, Dr. Dirisu and Hadia Weiss also spoke. It's quite interesting because the ministry has since noted these significant challenges in the system, and it has rolled out what we call the Social Impact Intervention Program, which we called it SII 774. 774 in the sense that we want to get to the last mile. We want to see that at every local government, every, let me say, child, a woman, a family member, and of course the vulnerable group are provided for, are protected, are catered for. In the we call it RH, SII 774, which RH means renewed hope, of course, and then SII, Social Impact Intervention. So just briefly, I would just want to call on the key thematic areas of that particular intervention. There is provision for energy access, there is agriculture and food security called WAVE, there is digital inclusion called Digital Harmony, there is health protection and well-being called Health Safeguarding, there is financial inclusion, there is equally creativity and innovation for women. We call it Women Rise, Innovate, and Create. There is also leadership and political participation, which we call it She Leads. There is also Education, Empower, and Enterprise Program, which targets also 5 million women and girls. And there is Child Advancement and Achievement Program called the CAP. And finally, we called it Families First Initiative. So all of these thematic areas are speaking holistically to the issues that have been talking in terms of being left behind, or in terms of going the extra mile to be deliberate about the provision of the infrastructure for the last mile. And that's what the ministry has been busy doing. And to complement that, an initiative was commenced in terms of, first, how do we ensure that this impact is felt, the impact is delivered, and the minister came up with the initiative of driving or developing the policies. What we have seen that has been existing in the system is that we have development partners, we have the NGOs, CSOs that all come together to say, today in Nigeria, you have the INGOs, that's the international non-governmental organizations, and the local organizations will also come. Some will build shelters. Some will tell you, oh, we're here to support women and empower them. Some will come and say, oh, we're supporting the vulnerable group. But what is the standard operating procedures for people to come and, operate within the system? We don't have any. What policies should drive the establishment of a shelter? What policy should drive the establishment of an orphanage? What of our recreational centers? What are the policy guidelines? What framework exists? What sort of standard operating procedures do we have for gender mainstreaming in our private and public sector? What provisions do we have in terms of saying that, okay, the workplaces should be gender friendly? How do we ensure the women are not deprived simply because today she's on maternity leave and she's having another child in the next 1 or 2 years? What opportunities do we make to ensure that her intellect is there, but she's not given the right table to speak simply because of her gender? So looking at all of these issues collectively, and she constituted a committee and invited the relevant stakeholders, and we were able to break down the requirement of the policies into 4 thematic areas. 1 is on child development and protection, 2 is on women and gender, 3 is on family first, that is family development framework, and the 4th is for the vulnerable group and social protection. And I can tell you recently, or just like 3 weeks ago, the committee was able to deliver 33 policies, standard operating procedures, implementation frameworks, national guidelines, and code of conduct across the 4 thematic areas. So for women and gender, there are 9 policies delivered. For the families, there are 6 newly entirely that have never been in place before. And there is a shared drive which the ministry has created with all of these documents there, and validation meeting has also been held regarding that. And at the council tomorrow, there's going to be another presentation regarding these policies, and it will be exposed to a wider consultation for everybody to make its input before it is finalized as a document. So this is what the ministry has been doing, has been busy doing. And it is, I would like to say that one of the fallout of the GS25 was that dedicated session on the family, and that led to some of these initiatives and thinking around what can the ministry do to, protect the family, to make provision for engaging the individuals at the rural areas. What are we doing to support them? So this has been a fantastic opportunity for us to engage. And I don't know whether I don't want to read text and, speeches. And because of that, we're looking forward to our session. Specifically, I know that the session, our proposed session beyond 2026, shaping Nigeria's next national gender policy, it will give us an opportunity to examine the lessons from implementation of the current policy, to interrogate the emerging priorities for the successor policy, and hear directly from government institutions, states, legislators, development partners, civil society, young people, persons with disabilities, the private sector, traditional, religious institutions, researchers, and stakeholders. And before I conclude, I would like to say that currently the ministry has equally commenced the review of the national gender policy, which of course, its tenure is coming to an end this year. And we're looking at a new one that could commence 2027 to 2032. And its working group has been constituted, and I believe every relevant stakeholder is invited to be part of it and make his or her own contribution. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ma. Let's do better. Let's do better. A warm round of applause for her. So the Gender and Inclusion Summit is not just a platform for talk or for conversations. We don't allow the conversations to remain there. We take them further. We put action to our words. So we're expecting you, just like we have been emphasizing. If you have ideas, you have, innovations, come to the Gender and Inclusion Summit, and we can assure you that it's not going to just end there. All right, so thank you so much again. And let's give everyone, all our distinguished panelists, a warm round of applause as we are gradually, winding up. Okay, so I just want to recognize, there are 2 ministries here that are represented here today. So we have the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology. We have a rep here, Dr. Ine Nwankwo. Can we give her a warm round of applause? All right, thank you, Ma, for coming. And then we also have from the Federal Ministry of Youth Development, Mr. Emmanuel Essien, who is the Director of Youth Health. Let's give him a warm round of applause. Thank you so much for showing up. We appreciate it so much. All right. So I will just call on Dr. Emily Ikidie, who is a research fellow and the head gender and inclusivity unit at the National Institute for Legislature and Democratic Studies, an arm of the National Assembly, who is also a member of our Technical Advisory Committee, to just give us, a call to action as we begin to round up the session. You're welcome, Ma. Please, let's give her a warm round of applause.
Good morning, the panelists. or should I say maybe the board, and then good morning, the audience, and then the press, members of the press, good morning. Good morning, everyone. This has been a very enlightening moment. I remember the first email I got from Kemi one time, and I saw the last mile. I wasn't thinking the way they were thinking now. I just thought, okay, are they saying this is the last GS conference that we're going to have? That was what, that was just where my mind went to. So this is very important because the narrative of what we're trying to say is very, very key. If people don't get what we're trying to say, then we're just wasting our time doing what we're doing. So it's very important that we have done this today. A lot has been said, and I think if I'm just going to put it in the open, I don't know if I can do it. Okay, so a lot has been said. We have been told we should all come. It's a very important conference that we cannot afford to miss. I've been very opportune to work with the team for the past 3 years to collaborate with them on GS conference, and I also want to congratulate them. It's a lot of work. It's not just about doing programs, doing things. It's how sustainable some of this we can do this program, how sustainable the innovation that has come into this conference, the expertise. I want to congratulate the team once again. So looking forward to the 2026 GS conference, I want to throw it to us. We've heard a lot. We've heard about the thematics and everything. So what should be the call to action from the audience? I just want maybe one person or two to say something before I conclude. Anybody that wants to say something? They've said it on the panel.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to the esteemed panelists. I think a call to action from me would be to young people like me and to vulnerable people like me, like I always say to. So it's exciting that GS Summit is finally coming to my constituency, but especially for young people, like Doc really said, we may have ideas, but you may be building in silos, trying to solve a problem that in the mind of the people you are building for, that problem no longer exists, right? So it is very important for young people to be in the room, young innovators especially, and also a call to people that are working with the excluded, the vulnerable people, you know, people with disability, people with special needs, and all of that. Is please come to the summit. Let's think together. Let's plan together for the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all. You know, that hits me again when he was speaking to me. If we're saying 133 million, I was asking myself while I was sitting there, I think I might also be in that space. So that means because if we give us the population now and where we are, a lot of people are in that space. And that's very concerning. What it means is if we don't solve the problems now, because by tomorrow the problems will become bigger. So if we don't solve the problem, we might have a larger population in that space. And so it's very concerning. If nobody is saying anything, I think for me particularly, the call to action is, I think we should reach out to people so that it's not just about us. I want to see people, the marginalized, doing presentation at the conference. I want to see them contributing at the conference. I want to look beyond. I actually want to see some ideas that blow your mind, because the ideas that blow our minds are in the rural areas. We don't even get to see them. We don't get to hear from them. So if it's possible, if you know somebody, if you can share, just share. Let those ideas come on board. By the time we see them, I think we might be on the right path to providing solutions to some of these challenges that we have been seeking and looking towards the developed worlds, thinking that they have our solutions and they don't have. We have the solutions by ourselves. And if we look inward, I'm sure we will get the solutions that we're actually looking for to solve the problems of this nation. So thank you, everyone, for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emily. Please, can we give her a warm round of applause? Thank you so much. So just to emphasize that for the Gender and Inclusion Summit this year, we're actually having a youth summit. Mr. Folao, so you are well and able represented. So we're having a youth summit. So every young person out there will be looking forward to have you, at the summit. You have your own space. So you create your solutions yourself, how you want to, want your solutions to be created. We are going to give you that opportunity this year to do that. And just to lay emphasis on a lot of things that have been said. So for this year's summit, we are working across thematic forums. So we've categorized the summit into different forums so that nothing is left out. So we have the Economic Inclusion Forum, we have the Health Forum, we have the Security Forum, and we also have the Gender-Based Violence Forum, and we have the Innovation and Technology Forum, and I think we have one more. Okay, yeah. Health Forum. I think I've mentioned that already. I think 6 forums. So, okay, just one skip. So we are looking forward to having you at the Gender Inclusion Summit. So if you are not yet registered, so I'm talking to our audience. I'm sure a lot of people are, watching this this press conference. Kindly go to our website, our social media handles, our platforms. Get there, register, and we'll be looking forward to receive you at the Gender and Inclusion Summit. So thank you so much once again. Let's give ourselves a warm round of applause. All right, so we'll be opening the floor for a few questions. We'll quickly take a few questions. Just a few questions. Any question? No question. Okay.
Okay, so my name is Ugunna from Wazobia FM. And it's Wazobia FM. We live, we breathe everything on the grassroots level. So finally, PIC is coming to my Zanga, the last mile. And I was around for the last year conference, and I remember the then Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Tuga, he said something about moving from talking about challenges to implementation. Even Madam Osasui made mention of moving from policy on paper to policy in action. And then Mrs. Abdul Razak also said something about representation as a means of, finally getting solutions. But I think I am tired. We are tired of calling to action, calling for action. Let's call. Every time we are calling, last year we called. We are calling now. We'll probably call next year. We'll keep calling. And I'm pretty sure if I'm dialing your line, your number right now, and you don't pick, I'll probably march to these gates and bang the door, and then we will just enter and we'll talk face to face. So my question, or I don't know how to put it, if it's a question actually, but when do we stop calling? What point do we get to and it becomes a trigger point where we tear our shirts and say, okay, what did they happen? What's happening? Like, because I would probably leave here and go for another one. People calling for something. Let's call. Looks like nobody's answering. When do we stop calling? When is the point where we get to the action? Even from, I cover Ministry of Women Affairs, and I'm sorry, nothing is being done when it comes to action. We keep just talking about, policy, we've done nothing. From the then minister, what's her name, Uju, there was a little bit of action, but for now, I don't know if the minister is doing much apart from calling for action. So when do we stop calling? Thank you.
Okay, so I will allow my distinguished panelists Okay, to respond to that.
We won't stop calling for action. And I think it's important. You know, the word call for action is a developmental term. It means mobilization, right? In social science theory, mobilization is not calling government. Mobilization is calling citizens into existence. Mobilization is, in Nigeria, we say mobilization as a political statement. But mobilization theory is about you summon the citizens into existence. It's not that they don't exist. It's that citizens in their passive mode don't behave as if they exist. You will drive past, you see children on the street, you don't ask questions. Where are their parents? Why are they not in school? You know, you will see children who are meant to be in school playing outside the school all day, and you don't stop the child and say, where is your teacher? Why are you not in the school compound? What did you learn today? These were questions where, when we were growing up, an adult who is not your parent or your relative will just see you walking back from school and stop you. Hi, children, what did you learn today? You know, no, nobody asks anybody question. So this calling is first summoning citizens into the existence of the spaces we need to be. Because when citizens are absent from the spaces, what happens is that a lack of accountability sets in. A lack of accountability sets in the policies announced, in the programs designed, in the resources committed, in the resources deployed. And then there are some parts of social impact that cannot be delivered by government on its own. You need religious leaders to open up some spaces. You need traditional rulers who control cultural barriers to open up some spaces. Sometimes, even when the innovation exists, your cultural barriers will even let the innovation not enter. Because you arrive at communities that need a solution the most. And that's where you will see that your cultural barriers are alive and well. So sometimes an innovation that can scale requires the cultural, religious leaders to understand it. Then they will now be the part of the co-producers of the opening up of the spaces where cultural barriers was limiting an innovation to scale. Sometimes an innovation exists already in the private sector. But the private sector has a problem. They were set up for profit. Their shareholders will not allow them to go and scale it where there is no lost capital, where there is no risk sharing. And what you need for those innovations to scale is for a group of actors, development finance, philanthropic finance, to come and say, look, this solution, we already know it works, but I want to take it to that village where your social private capital will not let it go. Can we co-create another capital pooled fund that gets it there? So we will keep calling, no. In fact, you must understand that between now and 2025, we better be calling every day. This call to action in the morning, Wazobia. You make it your business to call citizens to action in these spaces. Whether we are tired or not is no longer the conversation. The data shows that you have a transgenerational demographic shift. Nigeria will now be younger for longer. We are young, but we will get younger for the next 25 years. Yes, you're about 62, 65% of us are under 35. In 2050, 72% of us will be under 35. So we are younger for longer. So this call, we better keep calling. We better keep calling. So I think that the proper messaging for the call to action is that we will continue to call.
All right, thank you, sir.
I'm sure my partner here would also speak on behalf of the ministry, but I just wanted to add just a few comments. I think the day we stop calling, that is the day we have failed. The reason is because we are over 200 million, and if all of us have not listened to that call, it means we have not reached most of us. So we will continue calling, but we'll continue acting as we are calling. So it's supposed to go in tandem, the calls and the action, and we can't get tired. Some of us have been doing this for a bit long, but some longer than others, and we're still at the stage of both calling and action. When these summits hold, if there is one partnership or two partnerships that are unlocked and one innovation that has been scaled or reaches the last mile, I think we are successful. But the other thing that I would like to say is that from the comments of the representative of the Ministry of Women Affairs, what she said really held in my mind that after the summit last year, what they were able to do to come back to the drawing board, develop policies, and I'm going to give her the mic now to talk more about what she has done, but honestly, I am impressed. And if last year's Gender and Inclusion Summit was able to bring them to bear to start some of these new ideas, policies, frameworks, what we have done is to really at least move an inch, and that is success. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma. Thank you very much. I think you've all spoken in the same direction I intend to. However, I just want to ask our friend, I don't know whether you've been in Nigeria, you know, I have to ask the space you've been existing, because if there is any active, the most active minister at the moment is the Minister of Women Affairs. She's everywhere. She's every day launching one program or the other, every day touching the lives of Nigerians in different sectors and different thematic areas. Like I mentioned earlier, there is the program that we call the Women Agro Value Chain Program. That's WAVE. It was launched also, and women were empowered in agriculture. We have the energy. The women were also given, you know, opportunities for clean, you know, energy transmission in terms of cooking gas cylinders and empowerment. To the extent that women are now creating affinity groups under a World Bank project, which the ministry is driving, and the women were able to build and create wealth themselves. They came together, you know, traded under a little fund, and were able to grow it into above $5 million. And these are women doing wonderful things, and women are becoming more credit worthy. If you speak to the financial institutions, they will tell you now, because of the observation of what women are doing, a lot of financial institutions don't even like lending to men but to women, because women are able to turn it into measurable outcomes and be able to repay the loans that they're giving. And so because of that, a lot of projects are centered around women, children development, and protection. And you talked about the policies, thinking that they're just on paper, but let me share just one incident of something that happened that really pushed forward some of the initiatives on ground today. I think last year during the Children's Day, we were at the recreational park, and you know, the bouncing castle, the houses, the castles they, you know, build, that children play in, collapsed on children while they were having fun. And the first thing was parents rushing everybody around trying to, you know, pull out the kids so they don't suffocate. In that regard, who takes responsibility for ensuring there is always a guard on site? Who ensures that there is a medical team, a response team in events like this? So if you don't have policies before people can even establish such places, what happens then? Who takes responsibility? So there are lots of things you go to. We've also had the issue of a shelter where it was dehumanizing the way the children were living when we visited. And the question was, number one, even in terms of, you know, the number of rooms that you can have per, or dormitories that you can allow the children, or how you can keep the younger ones separated from the older children so that there's no molestation. A lot of things have to be considered which are not there in place. So if you don't have policies or guidelines or standard operating procedures, then you've not started at all. So those are the building blocks and the frameworks upon which we must comments, and then we can continue to push for those measurable outcomes that we've been talking about. And I believe that everybody is doing his piece, coming together, will get there someday, but automatically can never be in one day. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Just a second. And just, I think, wrapping this up and bringing us back to the Gender Summit. So I think one of the reasons why we're a bit hesitant to start the summit in 2022 was because we said, if we're going to start this, then we have to sustain it. And the reason is because advocacy is complex, not just in Nigeria. So you may be thinking that this is a Nigerian thing. I mean, go to the West, go to Europe and see some basic things they're advocating for today. see some reversals that have happened and people going back to the drawing board to advocate for those things over and over again. So advocacy is very complex. If you look at a lot of advocacy frameworks, there are many things that constitute, that you have to think about. You have to think about the public, you have to think about influencers, then you have to also think about decision makers, policy makers, and all that. Then you have to think about, where does political will come in? Okay, where does public awareness come in? Sometimes people are not even aware, about policies that exist and things that they can benefit from. Then you also have to think about commitment. So there are so many different parts of the whole. And then also in building the distance between evidence-based policy making and actually implementation. So evidence to action is also very complex. So if I know that it's important so I'll give you an example. When we have conversations, for example, around out of school children, the traditional thinking is bring them back into school. But it takes conversations in form like the Gender Summit to see that, there are a lot more complexities to bringing children back to school. Some may have to, there may be alternative pathways, there may be different conversations to have about different children. Literacy is not straightforward, Women economic empowerment is not straightforward. Economic inclusion is not straightforward. If you're going to economically include a woman, you have to, we're thinking about advocacy based on that layer for government, but there are different layers. Advocacy for their husbands, for the community leaders, the traditional leaders, the World Development Committee. So there are so many multiple complex layers for advocacy. And that's why Dr. Tayo has said that this call to action has to be daily. Advocacy is something that you must painstakingly agree must continue in perpetuity. So anyone who is not ready to advocate continuously should not enter into the advocacy cycle, unfortunately. So it's a hard pill that we have to swallow. But if we want to build an inclusive society, then we get into the bandwagon. Like Dr. Amina has said, some of us have been doing this for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Some of us, we met here, and some of us, some of us are tired, some of us have retired. But advocacy is something that you get into and then what you continue to do is refine your approach, become more strategic, become more intentional. Think about the platforms that will help you to achieve more success. Think about how to make it more focused. And that's really why we are calling everyone today to say, let's spend some time on the 8th and 9th of September and think of how we're going to build it. On the 7th of September, for the very first time in partnership with the NILDS, we have an academic summit. So we spend the whole day bringing the evidence and then looking at what the literature is saying, and all the academics will have an opportunity to put that evidence down. Then we bring that evidence on the 8th and 9th and see how that evidence, for example, can shape decision making. And we're really grateful to the Ministry of Women Affairs for partnering with us last year on that family session. It was so powerful, it was so rich. But for the first time, we began to see how, as a country, we can begin to shape that attention for family. And I'm really grateful to hear that so much more has come out of it. And we're going back this year again to shed more light on what has been built last year and continue to build. So we are not tired. We are here to continue to push the GS agenda to ensure that we are all working together to build an inclusive society. So join us on this race, and it's a daily call to action.
Thank you so much.
When PSC was set up in 2021, the first thing we thought it was important to fix around the conversation on gender was capacity. And so we set up the Gender and Development course. And we had the first edition in April 2022. But leading from the Gender and Development course, in June 2022, we were thinking of having some conversations around gender. Gender is not about creating a buzz or a call to action, holding placards, and then everybody goes home. Gender for me is that point where we start the conversation about understanding how society constructs roles for men and women. To show the seriousness of the conversation around gender, it was first of all important to have a dedicated platform
where everyone could be heard, where everyone could speak, and using different ways to ensure that the knowledge is passed across. And the only solution to that was a summit. The Gender and Inclusion Summit kicked off in 2022. We had 700 people in the room in Transcorp. We had over 3,000 people joined virtually. And we had some people outside of Nigeria. Combined over the 2 days, we had over 1,000 people attend.
Immediately we said, you know what, we're not letting this die here. So first of all, we're going to ensure that we create a publication that guarantees that post-summit people can make reference to the conversation, use that as an advocacy tool into the coming year. And that's how we developed the Purple Book. The beautiful thing about the Gender Summit is that we are so very organic in the way we are evolving the summit. 2023 Gender Summit, we introduced a day zero, which is now the Gender Summit Learning Workshop. We titled that workshop, Measuring What Matters. So this 2025, we've dreamt of the next 5 years. We're really, really ambitious. We see the Gender and Inclusion Summit as that place people want to be every September, not just to curate conversations, but to really enrich their personal experience, professional experience, their organizational experience, and bring together cutting-edge collaborations that would advance gender equity in Africa. When PSC was set up in 2021, the first thing we thought it was important to fix around the conversation on gender was capacity. And so we set up the Gender and Development course. And we had the first edition in April 2022. But leading from the Gender and Development course, in June 2022, we were thinking of having some conversations around gender. Gender is not about creating a buzz or a call to action, holding placards, and then everybody goes home. Gender for me is that point where we start the conversation about understanding how society constructs roles for men and women. To show the seriousness of the conversation around gender, it was first of all important to have a dedicated platform
where everyone could be heard, where everyone could speak, and using different ways to ensure that the knowledge is passed across. And the only solution to that was a summit. The Gender and Inclusion Summit kicked off in 2022. We had 700 people in the room in Transcorp. We had over 3,000 people joined virtually. And we had some people outside of Nigeria. Combined over the 2 days, we had over 1,000 people attend.
Immediately we said, you know what, we're not letting this die here. So first of all, we're going to ensure that we create a publication that guarantees that post-summit people can make reference to the conversation, use that as an advocacy tool into the coming year. And that's how we developed the Purple Book. The beautiful thing about the Gender Summit is that we are so very organic in the way we are evolving the summit. 2023 Gender Summit, we introduced a day zero, which is now the Gender Summit Learning Workshop. We titled that workshop, Measuring What Matters. So this 2025, we've dreamt of the next 5 years. We're really, really ambitious. We see the Gender and Inclusion Summit as that place people want to be every September, not just to curate conversations, but to really enrich their personal experience, professional experience, their organizational experience, and bring together cutting-edge collaborations that would advance gender equity in Africa.